and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Today I've got Jay Ball with me, and we're going to be talking about eliminating the guesswork from B2B marketing. So just to give you some context here before I get Jay to introduce himself, is that quite often B2B marketing always seems to be a bit like you're standing at a roulette wheel. And you've got all of the different places to place your chips, and you don't know where to place them. And someone rolls the ball, and we'll see what the slot that the ball lands in. What Jay's done is that he's actually done a whole load of research to try and actually take what we're calling this eliminating the guesswork from B2B marketing. So welcome, Jay. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. So it's Jason Ball, or Jason J Ball, as you'll see it on there. And also at our website, which is consideredcontent.com.
So talk us through. So you've done a really relatively big piece of market research where you've got a sample of 1,000 or so people now?
Yeah, just over.
What you've done is that you wanted to look at B2B effectiveness. So take us through what you've put together.
Yeah, so this kind of all started beginning of this year, really. And one of the things, like you, like me, like a lot of people in this whole area, is that we spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. We get lots of advice about what's dead, what you should do, what you should double down on, and all that type of thing. And it's kind of all over the place, as you mentioned in introduction. It is the spinning the roulette wheel. And initially, we went shopping to find some good research that we could use with clients and with our business, and we just couldn't find it. Not the kind of research that we wanted. So we put our hands in our pockets and we commissioned a large piece of research into senior B2B marketers, asking a whole range of things. So everything from what kind of strategy do they have in place? How differentiated are they? What brand assets do they use? How do they get customer insight? And then we asked them what measurements they use and what tactics do they use across lead gen, demand gen, and brand building. And they had sort of almost 40 options to choose from at that point. And then we got them to rank them. How good is this at delivering against your objectives? And based on that, we can cut the data and look at it and say, well, for people in this sector with this objective, selling things at this deal size, these are the optimum tactics that they should be using at that point. And also here are some interesting experiments maybe that others, not so many others, are using, but actually seem to be delivering outsized results. So it's a broad piece. It covers technology, marketing, professional services, and manufacturing.
Okay. So at the moment, just those three verticals?
Just those three, which I think it's slightly the holy trinity of B2B probably, but over time we will be looking to expand out from that.
So what have you been able to do? So you've asked all those questions, you've got all that data. So what have you been able to do with that? Have you been able to look at things like top performing companies or what they're doing? Or?
Well, one of the things that we can do with it, and actually if you go on our site, you'll see there's a scorecard link on there.
Remind people what site that is.
So consideredcontent.com, up on the top level navigation, you'll see B2B scorecard. So if you click on that, you can then select from whether you're in technology, professional services, or manufacturing / industrial. And basically you can do a set of the questions at that point. It's a slightly cut down set of the questions. But what it does, it enables us to then compare people against different benchmarks. So are they, have they got some of what we term the upstream elements sorted? So the strategy, the differentiation, customer
strategy,
all of that. And then what does their tactical mix look like in comparison to what the data says that the highest performing marketers use? So we can say, well, ultimately, you've got three tactics in the top 10, 2 in the top 20, and things like that. Obviously, once we get into it with clients, we go a lot deeper than that. We do a much bigger sort of scorecard version at that point. And at that point, we can really look at, okay, where do your tactics sit based on all the different aspects of your strategy and where you are in the market and differentiation and all these sorts of things.
But from a free perspective, there's an ability to go to your website and actually to benchmark yourself against a light version of the data.
Yeah, I mean, it's comparing you against the full data set, but it limits you slightly in terms of how many tactics you can look at in there, and the scorecard system itself gives you a broad overview of where you are. Now, I do try to follow up with anybody that does the scorecard, time permitting, just to give them a little bit more sort of personal details in terms of what they're doing and how that compares. But you can still get a broad sense of kind of where are we at this point compared to what works in the real world as opposed to the world of LinkedIn marketing bros.
Because in a way, a lot of people get their knowledge from different places. For example, you might follow. I'm a big follower of Mark Schaefer. He wrote the foreword in my third book. I found you because you wrote a really interesting article on marketing profs. That's one of the other resources I follow. But at the end of the day, you've got all these different competing people saying, you need to do email marketing, or you shouldn't do email marketing, and all of these things. And what you've been able to do is really condense it down.
Yeah, and it's trying to take it away from the opinion and the theoretical to the data and the practical. So, there's a lot of advice you get which sounds absolutely great until you try and apply it. So you should be doing this. We should all turn our sites into some sort of high volume B2B publishing platform, which is fantastic if you're one of the huge companies that can actually manage to do that. But actually, what a lot of marketers, particularly in B2B, where the teams aren't generally huge and you're pulled one way and the other, you just need some actual practical advice. What should I be doing? What do other people just like me do who do it well? What shouldn't I be doing? What's a money pit? And things like that. And it's very difficult to find that information. So we went shopping for it and we couldn't find it. So that's how this all came about.
I think usually from LinkedIn terms, you'll get somebody that will say this tactic works, and that's because that's what they do.
Yeah, or they're selling. They're either this is the tactic that you should be using right now. And buy my course on it.
Yes.
And I happen to be the sales development rep of a MarTech company that just happens to be selling the solution that does this. What a coincidence. But actually being able to tap into what other marketers do, it is the people just like me. And one of the things also we see across the data is there is no one size fits all.
Okay.
So what the top tactics that work in certain circumstances for technology don't work in those circumstances for professional services, and don't work in quite the same way for manufacturing. The tactics that work at a certain deal level within one sector, so technology, for example, don't work at another deal level. So if you're selling things that are sort of in that 50K to 100K level, you may have a very, very different tactical mix than if you're selling something that's north of 500,000, for example. But none of that ever comes through in the sort of advice that you see around. It is this, this is dead. Everybody do ABM. Everybody do this, that, or the other. Whatever's the you really must have that TikTok channel and things like that. It just isn't that simple. Having said that, it's not as complicated as some people make it as well. We see that across the data, most people are using sort of 5, 6, 7 tactics in any one of the different sort of lead gen, demand gen, and so on. They're not trying to boil the ocean, and for the most part, most marketers simply don't have the budget, particularly at the moment, don't have the budget to do that.
So, drilling down a level, is there anything? Clearly, there's what you found. I think we already knew this.
Yeah.
That there isn't a one size fits all. I think we've all been searching. I've been searching in drawers for the silver bullet, but never been able to find one.
Yeah.
So what can people do? What are there some fundamental things that we can get in place?
Yeah, and as you said, Tim, that some of this is not new. So, but some of the things we see. So we divide things into sort of upstream and downstream. So the upstream is the tactical stuff, the strategic stuff. The downstream is the tactical stuff in broad terms. So some of it is kind of stating the obvious. So we see that people who have a written strategy that flows from the business strategy are around about 50% more likely to be in a top performing groups across the whole study. People who have a differentiated position, now they're almost twice as likely to be a leader than those that don't. But the important thing here, and again, the details matter, because it's only when you have a differentiated position that you have research with customers and compared to your competitors.
Yes.
If you only have one of those, we see those benefits evaporate, or at least they become marginal differences at that point. And again, all this makes intuitive sense. I may think I'm differentiated, but actually my customers don't see the world the way that I do, because I'm the inside the jar.
And I think that's key, Jay, which is that quite often what happens is that we think that we're differentiated purely because we think we're differentiated.
Yeah.
And I remember working in an organization where we did something we shouldn't have done, which is we got somebody that we just recruited from a competitor to present their company presentation as if they were a competitor. And they basically said all of this, they had all of the uniques that we said.
Yeah. Uniques end up not being quite so unique.
And actually the presentation, you could have actually taken the logo off and put on our logo, and it could have been our presentation.
Yeah, and we do this when we're doing sort of strategic messaging and positioning work. Is that as part of that, we go out and we in effect retrofit what the competitors' value propositions are by just looking at what they say on their site, because that's all a customer sees.
Yep.
And the number of times we find everybody clustering around one sort of area, they all use the same kind of language and the same points and the same benefits and things like that. And ultimately, all that really does it. There was some research a while back that the number of times that somebody will go away from any sort of communication and then basically just forget who it came from, and they would just assume that it comes from one of the leaders in the market. They just default to it. It's that mental availability thing. So if you're doing undifferentiated things, you generally end up supporting the market leaders as opposed to setting your brand apart. And we see this through the data. So we see that those that do have the differentiation, it just cascades down through everything. So basically everything gets better at that point. Even if they're choosing not so great tactics for what they're doing, they're getting higher value from that than those that are undifferentiated. And it just makes intuitive sense, but it's good to have the data behind it.
So what's the one thing that you could do?
The one thing you could do, there's a probably an annoying answer, which is it depends. It's a combination of things, actually. So yes, having the strategy in place, doing the hard work around differentiation, which it is hard work because it does mean you generally have to get competing thoughts in the business on side with you, and they've all got their own sense of doing that. Then the other element is do the customer insight work. So that's one of the things that we see have the largest effect in here is those that do the right kinds of research into what their customers are thinking, do the right kind of research into having an ICP persona that is real world. They're the ones that, as I say, we see this cascade effect all the way down, that everything performs better. They're more likely to be in the top performers anyway. Every tactic they then choose just performs that much harder. Sometimes it's marginal. Quite often it's reasonably significant.
I It always amazes me when I talk to organizations, and in most cases, marketing never talk to customers.
Yes, it's considering, when you think that marketing should be within a business the expert on the customer,
Yeah.
both the existing customers and the people that should be the customers, where they're going to see their future growth from. The number that don't do that research, and we see it again, we see it in the research. So again, you go on LinkedIn, everybody find your ICP, double down on that, focus in on that, and things like that. Across the research, only about 20% ish of people across the board ever research their ICP.
Right.
Which is a staggeringly small number when you
Yes.
consider the noise around it.
So other question is about experimentation. Should you experiment?
So the way that we look at this, based on the data, is that you're going to need to be, there's always going to be a need for a core high performing set of tactics, and again we can drill down in the data and say, okay, for these characteristics, these objectives, everything around this is the core. Now that could be mediated then by, okay, you've only got so much budget, so okay, there might be this top 10 based on your objectives, and you might not be able to afford 3 or 4 of them.
Yep.
But you can narrow in on the most effective ones that you can afford.
So you can stand at the roulette wheel and you can place your bets.
Yes, but with this, you can block out some of the non-performing holes in the roulette
Okay,
wheel.
Yes, good metaphor.
But then we also, because one of the things that we see throughout this is that things that are popular are not necessarily the things that are effective, and vice versa. The things that are effective are not popular. So, if I look at measurement, the number one most valuable measurement is closed won. It's the 28th most popular. The second most popular is social engagement, which is the flip side, is the 28th most effective. And we see this all the way through. We see it through from measurement to tactics. So the number one most popular tactic in lead gen is the 31st most effective. The third most effective is the 28th most popular. And we see the seesawing, not all the time, but we see it happens all across the board. So, but at the same time, it's important, just because it's unpopular doesn't mean you shouldn't try it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we can do with the data is that you can look into what would be promising experiments. So not that many people are using a particular tactic, but the ones that are seem to be seeing outsized results from it. So if you can do a low-cost experiment into that and just test it, just see if it's starting to deliver results that outperform whatever else it is that you're doing. Because if it's not that popular and you can see high results from it, then happy days, because you're facing far less competition. It'll help with things like differentiation, because you're just doing something different, let alone positioning your business differently. And you can start to tune and optimize your approach as you move forward, while still having that kind of rock solid core of this is the stuff that actually works.
Fascinating. So in terms of experimentation, there would be a certain amount of test and invest type.
Yeah, and we would always advise it. And again, I know this is difficult at the moment because budgets are super tight, but hiving off some budget for low-cost experimentation, I would say, is never a bad idea. I mean, as long as you're still able to keep the lights on and all that type of stuff.
Jay, it's been a fascinating conversation with you. Remind people, so if you go to your website, top right-hand corner, something, you can do a cut-down version of this.
Yeah, so if you go to considercontent.com, go up onto the top nav, you'll see a B2B scorecard. Basically, you can click on that. You then select whether you're in tech, professional services, or manufacturing, And then it'll ask you a bunch of questions, which you work through. It takes 10 to 15 minutes or so to do it, based on people doing it at the moment. You'll then get an immediate results back in terms of, you're above average, below average, and how do you sit across about 8 different areas. It'll also then email you a more in-depth report on that. And then a little while after, when I find a little bit of time, you'll get an email from me, just giving you a little bit more detail, because there's certain things that we just can't do with the scorecards.
Yeah. And Jay, remind us where we can find you.
So I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to talk, to be connected to. I'm pretty relaxed about all of that sort of stuff, and you'll see me putting stuff out around this kind of thing and B2B in general. And then the other place is our website, so consideredcontent.com.
Consideredcontent.com. Jay, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this. It's
Brilliant.
Fascinating that you're actually trying to get, I'm going to change the metaphor now, a crystal ball to look into the future of B2B marketing.
Yes, no, we're really excited about it. It's fundamentally changed how we view some of this stuff, and we've been doing this a long time, and it's now a core tool for the way that we will be working with our clients moving forward.
Yeah. Excellent.